Welcome to the Aced It podcast, where we turn science into sense. This is the 14th season of Aced It, and we are so incredibly grateful that we are able to deliver rich scientific content to you in a usable and understandable way. Aced It is brought to you via the Justice Community Overdose Innovation Network, or JCOIN. If you're new to Aced It, welcome. We're so glad you're here. And check out the prior seasons to begin or continue your learning journey. A special thank you to every wonderful listener. We promise we will continue working to help you learn and grow via Aced It. Also, a quick plug for a few other JCOIN features. Did you know you can get technical assistance for your organization from the experts at JCOIN? And did you know you can apply for a small research grant to help fund an innovative study idea? Yep, through JCOIN. And did you know you can apply to be a JCOIN LEAP scholar or investigator, a year-long mentorship that will improve your skills? Also through, you got it, JCOIN. If any or all of these exciting offerings sound interesting, check out our website, JCOIN-CTC.org, and learn about the many JCOIN courses, products, and opportunities beyond Aced It, all designed to translate science into sense for you. With that, I am honored that you're with us. I'm Danielle Rudes, your host, and this is Aced It. Welcome to the last episode, episode 10, of season 14 of the Aced It podcast, about the stories we tell about drugs and overdose. This season, we've been exploring the narratives told about drugs and overdose, who gets to tell them, and the narratives they choose to spread. Ultimately, these narratives shape stigma, guide policy responses, and affect access to treatment. Yay! Thanks for sticking around with us for the final episode of this season. Today, we'll be shifting the focus to those who have first-hand experience with the overdose crisis, whose voices are often misunderstood, people who use drugs, or sometimes abbreviated PWUD, and the support groups they turn to or sometimes turn away from. We will look at how people who use drugs talk about each other, how recovery communities can both help and harm, and how new forms of peer support, such as online forums, are rewriting the story about recovery. Let's get into it. Let's start out with something that might surprise some of our new listeners and might not surprise our frequent listeners. Here it is. Stigma doesn't always come from the outside. It can also exist within communities of people. In this case, people who use drugs. For example, in a large study conducted by Silby and colleagues 2023, who interviewed people using drugs across rural areas of the U.S., they found that participants drew really sharp lines between different types of drug users. They grouped people by things like their drug of choice, how they used the drug, like smoking or injecting, how they got the drugs, their age, their gender, how their drug use started, and even what kind of recovery path they were on. These categories were not neutral. They were loaded with judgments about morality, self-control, recklessness, and whether someone was a quote-unquote real addict or, quote, not like those junkies, unquote. In other words, stigma wasn't always something coming from the outside world. It was also showing up within the community. People would draw these lines to distance themselves from certain drugs, behaviors, or identities that were seen as worse than others. And those distinctions can really matter because they shape how people see themselves and how they see each other. They can influence who feels accepted and supported and who ends up getting pushed away, even within spaces that are meant to help people recover. Those same kinds of narratives showed up in support groups, especially around what counts as recovery. In the U.S., 12-step programs, like Narcotics Anonymous, are often the most readily available resources for opioid use disorders, and they've helped many people. But they can also create real-life barriers for those who use medications like methadone and buprenorphine, some of the most effective medications for reducing overdoses. In a study by Andraka Cristal and colleagues 2021, they examined 30 individuals who took part in 12-step groups and had a history of taking medication for opioid use disorders. These individuals noted instances in which they were prohibited from speaking at meetings, couldn't get a sponsor, they were discouraged from staying on medication, or they were blocked from claiming their recovery time because they were still on drugs. Another study by Bowles and colleagues found a similar clash between previous drug use and medication, but this time around, naloxone, the overdose reversal drug. Newly abstinent people involved in a 12-step oriented space often refused to carry naloxone because they felt it tied them to the drug-using identity that they wanted to leave behind. Some individuals expressed that carrying naloxone would, quote, keep the chapter open, unquote, or make them feel like they were still hanging around people who use drugs. These examples show how ideas about what real recovery can shape not only whether someone feels welcomed or supported, but also whether people engage in life-saving harm reduction practices. At the same time, peers and support groups can be an incredibly powerful antidote against stigma when they're done with supportive intentions. Research done by Schweitzer and colleagues 2023 found that people in treatment experience high social criticism by their loved ones and often have smaller, less diverse social networks. For many, feeling less than those around them can feed internalized stigma and make it harder for them to stay engaged in care. But peer recovery specialists, people with their own lived experience of substance use and recovery, can help flip that script. For example, in a study done by Anvari and colleagues 2022, participants described peers as uniquely credible by sharing their experiences with long-term recovery and by challenging shame by reminding them that they were once in their shoes. Peers can also help people push back against stigma and support them in staying in treatment even when others might criticize their choices. These stories are evolving in online spaces too. As we discussed in episode 3 of this season, social media platforms like Reddit have become important places where people who struggle with substance use seek advice, share advice, or simply vent to others who understand. On Reddit, people in opioid use treatment and recovery use anonymous forums as a kind of 24/7 support group, especially to talk about stigma. In a unique study done by Kemper and colleagues 2022, they looked to examine the type of stigma that people often seek support from in these Reddit groups. During their search, they found that people in these groups described an overwhelming sense of shame about having an addiction, fear of being judged by family or employers, and confusion about how alcohol use is socially acceptable, but medication for opioid use is condemned. Many focus on what is described as quote-unquote intervention stigma, or the judgment and misinformation surrounding medication for opioid use disorder. Kempner and colleagues 2022 found that people often describe experiencing this stigma from the public, healthcare providers, workplaces, child protective services, and even abstinence-based self-help groups. Many people often go online to ask questions they feel they might not be comfortable asking anywhere else. These conversations aren't just about venting frustration. People are also sharing advice and helping each other figure out how to navigate these challenges. In many ways, these spaces start to function like informal recovery rooms, one where medication is accepted, harm reduction is normalized, and people can openly tell others about their lives without risk of losing their seat at the table. While we aren't suggesting this is the best way to navigate substance use recovery, the evidence doesn't suggest that, at least not yet. Online spaces can be an incredible tool if used alongside professional help. So, okay, what does all this mean for the stories we tell about drugs and overdose? Well, sometimes it's not just a matter of uninformed outsiders. It can live inside recovery rooms, within families, in online spaces, and even among people who use the substances themselves. But when done right, those same spaces can also be sites where people build relationships and support each other, despite struggled or lived experiences. As we close this season, remember, fixing the overdose crisis is not just about changing policies or prescribers. It is about changing the ways that we talk about each other. Stay informed, stay considerate, and give grace. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the ACE-IT podcast. We love hearing from you, so if you have comments, topics to suggest, or some science you'd like us to cover in a future season, please write to me, Danielle Rudes at Sam Houston State University. My email is drudes@shsu.edu. And of course, thank you to the Justice Community Overdose Innovation Network, JCOIN's Coordination and Translation Center, funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, housed at George Mason University, where this podcast originated. Thank you to our fabulous scriptwriter team and also my fabulous doctoral students at Sam Houston State University, Bryce Kushmerek-McCune, Jalen Magana, and Alexa Mata. And a huge and a heartfelt thank you to the team at Slonky LLC for their wonderful podcast production as always. Tune in again soon for another episode of Aced It.